Our practices are 10 times harder than the games, Ryan Curley. That's what Javon Bullard said about the Georgia Bulldogs practices versus their games. We've heard this for a while. Maybe the other day was slightly more complicated. Maybe it was only 9 times harder or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I believe him when he says that.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, look, they're playing against the best in practice every day, and when there aren't many teams out there that we think are as good as Georgia or close to it or better than Georgia. So when they step out on the field against a lot of these teams, especially your UT Martins and your Ball States, yeah, I mean, guys like Javon Bullard, I'm sure all of them walk out there and
You're still alive, man. Keep
never
rolling.
introduce Matt either.
No one saw that, but go ahead.
Matt's here too.
Yes, but the audience didn't see it.
Listen,
Oh.
no, this team competes. They work hard, and this is not the first time a player has said that. And we talk all the time, iron sharpens iron, and when you fill a team full of 5-stars who love to compete and work, this is what's going to happen. And these are the guys that Georgia goes out and recruits. I mean, Javon Bullard was a 3-star, but Kirby Smart has loved him for a while because of his work ethic, his ability to compete and work and practice at his highest level. And he makes guys better. They make him better. And like Ryan said, you see it on Saturdays when they're out and they're having fun. And a lot of times these games are over by the half. And so it's easy to say, yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of competition going on during practice. And Kirby gets on those guys. I mean, he coaches them hard. We hear him yelling, down the street. He gets after them, and he holds them to a standard during the games on Saturday, but in practice as well. And if you're not working hard and you're not giving it everything you have every rep, you're not going to play. And so when you have that type of culture, even on the practice field, it turns into championships, and that's what we've seen the past 2 years.
And make sure you're visiting ecopoly.com. Their link is right down below. You can redo your backyard with confidence. I'm going to put it on the screen right now. Knowing that you've made a conscious choice to support the environment, visit ecopoly.com today and let us know. Let us help you create your outdoor heaven that you can enjoy guilt-free, knowing that you've made a difference with EcoPoly. It's Georgia-made. Of course, I talk about this quite a bit, Ryan, down a little bit south of Milledgeville, actually, where Javon Bullard is from, in Dodge County, where Leonard Floyd is from. We've been in these practices, probably far too many practices through the years, Ryan. You watch them go. The practices are hard, and just the 10, 15 minutes that we get to see, they are physical practices. These guys aren't just saying that. I think that if you are just like last year, if you're Broderick Jones or 21, if you're Broderick Jones and you're for the most of the year, you're a number 2 offensive lineman, you're going up against, Nakobe Dean. Your outside is either is Trayvon Walker, the number 1 overall draft pick. Yeah, practices are harder. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and they're intense, right? That's
the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense all the time. All the time. When they're getting coached, when they're doing their reps, it's intense. I haven't gotten to see Ohio State or Alabama or some of these other premier programs practice the way, and I'm sure it's not too dissimilar, right? At elite programs, I'm sure that it's somewhat similar. But you walk in there, man, there's always someone getting yelled at. Something, someone's up in their grill. Kirby's on the mic, shouting people out. Javon Bullard, actually, I believe it was him the other day. Someone asked him, because Kirby praised him the other night, and so then someone asked Javon after practice, what does that mean to you that he praised you tonight about your practice? And he's like, well, he was also yelling at me on the megaphone. So it happens to all the players. No player can escape the mic.
This is where I'm going, right where I'm going before we go to Matt. Why don't you try to explain to folks, because, we have a pretty broad audience, and there's a very limited number of people who watch Georgia practice. The 3 of us have, some of the rest of the beat has. But, if you're just a fan, you're not watching them practice. So, Ryan, try to explain what it's like at practice. And just to give a little color, remember that where Georgia practices is right in the middle of it's not a neighborhood, but it's not an
I
industrial
can paint the
area.
picture if you want. I mean, look, it's
Yeah.
in between an elementary school. It's
Yes.
got
Yeah.
Stegman Coliseums up against it
There's a
on
church across the
near
street,
Smith Street. And
or there's the
look,
Catholic Center. The
you walk
Catholic
in and
Center's
there's
across the street. It's not a church, but you get my point.
yeah, you walk in and there's 3 football fields dedicated to the whole thing, right? You got your 1 indoor and your 2 outdoor, and they're, most of the time what they allow us to see is mostly position work and, position reps and stuff like that. But those individual coaches, right? Whether it be a Trey Scott or a Todd Hartley or whoever it is, and even guys underneath them, they're always getting after it. Just every little play is critiqued. Every
Yep.
little rep is critiqued, and that is why it's so intense, and that's why one of their mottos is just getting better every single day.
One more thing though about getting back to the microphone.
Mhm. Oh,
What is so curious about Kirby to me is just like logistically, he's holding, what's going to happen at practice that day, but he also holds the mic often. He does not use a
yeah, he's got a handheld a lot of the
and,
time. He's walking around, bouncing around. But look, when you're in there, it's not just players that might be struggling or fighting for player time. It's the stars. They're getting that same exact treatment. Kirby talked about it a little bit on Monday as well. That he has the same standard for walk-ons as he does the 5-star. It's all the same. I think teams that don't have their name on the back of their jersey, obviously Georgia does, but in practice, that's not there.
Matt, you watch a lot of high school practices. You've been to Georgia practices at bowl games and in Athens too. What's the jump from high school to college, generally speaking?
The pace at which they go. Georgia's lightning quick, and I hear that from parents and recruits all the time. Like, hey, these schools are practicing hard; they get after it. But then you go to Georgia, and it's even more intense and more fast-paced as all these other programs when they visit, whether it's in the spring or in the fall. A lot of them are in the spring, and I think we've talked about this before. When I ask parents and kids, like, hey, what makes Georgia different? They say, man, they get after it, and it's fast-paced and so intense, more than we even imagined. And a lot of kids like that. If you're a parent, you have to like that because you have a good feeling that your kid's going to get better each and every day at practice if they put the work in. And it's clear that a lot of these guys are putting the work in. You can't start on this team unless you put the work in and win these coaches over in practice. And a lot of these guys, that's why you're seeing freshmen early in these, cupcake ball games, is because you can't teach experience. They're getting experience, but they're also earning it on the practice field.
Well, I think, the guys in the spotlight more than any, I don't know if that was feedback or what. The guys that are in the spotlight more than anybody are always the quarterbacks. I thought what we saw Saturday was a great example of development, getting all 3 of those guys. Did Brock? I'm pretty certain Brock got 2 drives. Did Gunner get 2 as well? I'm trying to remember.
I think he got 2.
Felt like it.
One of his drives was very. He might have only had 1, but that's what we see. What we're not watching is, like, for instance, Austin Blasky got a hold called on him, and so did
Oscar.
I think Morris got a
start.
I think Morris got a called hold too. And I don't call that. I don't say that to like disparage them. I'm just pointing out that they're playing and they know what a hold is now. I mean, they already knew what it was, but now that they know what a hold is in front of 50,000 people, something like that. So I think we're going to talk in a couple of riding homes from now about this past weekend in college football. But Georgia had the luxury this weekend, Ryan, of playing a team that they were a lot better than and getting a lot of feedback that night in Athens.
It matters so much. Just that players, like Gunner, like Brock, guys that, aren't on the field. They don't get those game reps. Like AJ Harris, look at all the freshmen, CJ Allen, like just the list of players goes on and on. I mean, it's got to be up there for one of those games where just the most Georgia players ever. I mean, it's got to be up there. I've noticed it more than the last 2 years. Just a game where they rotated and got as many guys as they can out on the field.
But I don't remember. But they did not on the offensive line. They did not on the offensive.
So they didn't. Yeah, that was a little bit of a discuss tonight. So in years past where they've kind of rotated one or two linemen in, instead they kind of just went with just three different groups this time.
I
But
noticed
we talked about which guy. Austin Blasky is a guy that Kirby feels like can step in and play if he needs to play. He feels comfortable. But I think Saturday was important for guys like Micah Morris, guys like Dylan Fairchild, who might have to play here in the near future. Next year.
Yeah, and those practices will be really the practices that Georgia's going through right now. We're going to see how Dylan Fairchild and Morris and Wilson and Green and Bobo and all these guys feeling. Hughley. I mean, there are a lot of younger players that are going to be playing on this team in the future. Everybody's, Xavier Truss is a multi-year starter now. Xavier Truss was developed by multiple offensive line coaches and has now gotten a couple of different offensive coordinators. This is not magic. These guys are doing this because it's hard to do.